We've been working together on the advertising model for Broadsheet over the past 4 or so years together. And what we've been finding is that branded content, as I'm sure all of you know, has been an increasingly massive part about what we need to do as publishers.
Yeah, when we were asked to speak here today, we thought the branded content would be the most relevant topic. We spend the majority of our time at the moment working on it on the advertising side of the business, and that's because most of the briefs that we get in contain a request for branded content, but I think that the awareness and the understanding about how we work and about how to get the best results out of an audience is still quite low. Branded content's not new, but the widespread use of it is really big right now.
Mm. As publishers, sort of traditionally, the model and our job has been to create great content, build an audience with that content, and then provide value to advertisers to that audience. Increasingly, that's happening through branded content. The challenge, though, and the risk we run is that if you're taking the content, which is the part traditionally used to engage the audience, and you start inserting messages and advertising in there, you're taking away from that engagement factor, which hurts the audience, hurts the publisher, and hurts the advertiser.
Yeah, branded content can be fantastic and can achieve incredible results for your brand and for the audience if it's treated correctly. At the moment, a lot of the buying process around branded content is treated the same as display, and a lot of creation processes too, where branded agencies will go away, work up a finished idea, and then come to us with a budget to insert it into our site. And that worked really well, like Nick was saying, when you could just insert display ads into clearly defined ad slots. But we can't insert a brand message into our content if the audience isn't going to engage with it. Because if all the briefs have a request for branded content and we start producing content that's not engaging, like Nick said, we stop engaging the audience, the publication goes backwards and the audience shrinks.
Yeah, all of a sudden you find yourself becoming an infomercial sort of channel where everything you're producing is this sort of shouty thing to an audience. So I guess what we're going to be talking about today is we've got 5 key points. We've been doing this for a while. We've had to figure it as we go along. There's certainly no playbook to digital publishing or to branding content. But when we get it right, we find that these sort of 5 key points are the ones that keep popping up. And it really all wraps around different ways of looking at how to engage an audience. No matter who you are, if you're putting content in front of an audience, you've got to engage them first.
And a lot of today will probably look a bit more like a discussion, because this is it's pretty much the discussion we have every day with our team. And Nick and I have been doing it for the last 4 years, and we've got a great team now, but every brief we go back to the drawing board and we go through these 5 points. But it is a discussion. Like Nick said, we didn't have these 5 points finalised last year. So for the last 4 years we've been feeling our way, but I think that these are the 5 points that we can really share today and bring up.
And it changes. Over the last 4 years, what the advertiser wants, what the market wants, shifts. Today is different from 6 months ago, is different from 6 months before that. But if we keep looking at these 5 key points, we'll find that no matter what you do, if you focus on the audience, you focus on engagement, you'll get a win.
And every advertiser wants the exact same thing from us. All we've got to sell on the advertising side of the business is a connection with an audience. So it doesn't matter if that's one newsletter sponsorship or a 20-piece content series. We're trying to facilitate a connection between the brand and the audience, and we do that via engagement. Because if no one's engaging, it doesn't work.
First point.
Put the audience first. People always come to us with a content-led campaign, and we try to say to them, we need an audience-led campaign. Because if you publish content and the audience doesn't engage with it, it's worthless. It's like a billboard that no one looks at. So almost before the idea, think about the audience. Think, what does this audience want? Why are they going to that publication? What can my brand give them that's going to make them look more favourably upon my brand?
From the publisher's perspective, I'm always thinking, why has the audience come to the website? And that's where we start from. When we're working with an advertiser in a branded content campaign, we think, why is the audience here? And in Broadsheet's case, it's about getting to know the best of their city, and whether it's Melbourne or Sydney. And advice, they want to be entertained, they want to be informed, they don't want to be shouted at. So if we start thinking, and if you recognize you're working with a publisher, why has the audience come to this publication? What's the value that this publication gives that audience? And how can we help give value to that audience? We start building good campaigns.
And early on, I'd come in with a lot of briefs from brands and say, hey, we're going to do this campaign, and it's going to be this content. And our editors, who I just saw walk in before, would look at me and say, why? Like, why are we going to do that? Why would the audience care? Why is the audience going to read that? They're not going to read that. So that really taught me to go back and think we have to put the audience first to deliver any result to a brand.
So as we do this, we'll go through some examples and try and pull out some case studies of where we've done this.
The collaboration we did with Tourism Tasmania was great because we'd just done our audience survey and we'd asked 5,000 of the audience, where's the next domestic travel destination you want to go to within Australia? And the number one was Tasmania. So we had a great insight there. We thought if we get the right idea, it's really going to work for the brand.
A big part of why people come to Broadsheet is to use it as a planning tool. They want to know not only what to do in their city, but when to do it and why to do it and how to do it. So we thought that this was a really good opportunity for us to sort of take that lens and apply that to Tasmania, which is, as Rene said, is somewhere that a big portion of our audience were really excited to travel to. So we put together an illustrated downloadable guide, which performed exceptionally well. We were finding that people were saying, yes, I want to go to Tasmania, and I'm a member of the Broadsheet audience, so I want to know the best things to do. I want to know the good restaurants. I want to know if I'm driving from Hobart to Launceston, what's worth a road trip? Where's a little cheese producer? Where's a little gallery that's worth going to?
And the results of the campaign were the audience downloaded 7,500 guides, and they were PDF itineraries that we'd made up. But the really great thing was that Tourism Tas got to apply the Broadsheet lens to travelling through Tasmania, and they got to give the audience exactly what they wanted. If they had have just come to us and said, here's an amazing video that we prepared earlier, put it in front of your audience, they wouldn't have got that lens and they wouldn't have got that Broadsheet stamp on what they were doing.
I guess we were talking about before, it's if Tourism Tasmania had come to us and they said, hey, here's a guide to Tasmania, we would have thought, well, this is not the Broadsheet guide to Tasmania. People haven't come to Broadsheet to read your guide to Tasmania. They've come to read our perspective on it, our editor's perspective. So we had editors down there, we had photographers down there, we sent everyone down and they did a bit of a road trip and they kind of talked to locals and we got a really authentic, genuine connection with Tasmania. And for me, I love it because we look at traffic, even today, this is a campaign from about 18 months ago, 12 months ago, and we're still getting huge traffic. We still get really good results for this, which demonstrates to me that the audience are still getting value from it. The brand and the destination Tasmania still gets huge value from it, well beyond any campaign period.
And a lot of the points that we're going to make today may sound like we're saying work with us and not the agencies, but that's not the case at all. Every time we get a really good result on a partnership, it's when we've got the brand, the creative agency and the media agency all sitting around together and all working in collaboration. So, you do have to put the audience first with the idea, with the process, but we all have to work together.
It's all a role to play. Next point.
Be clear about your objectives. Your objective is not to create content. Your objective is not for us to show your content to our audience. Your objective is not for us to use your social media handles. It's not brand mentions. It's not product shots. Your objective is to engage our audience. And going back to the first point, the publisher holds the key to that engagement because they know what the audience is doing. So be very, very clear about your brand objectives and then let us build content around your brand objectives.
Mm-hmm. So share with us, rather than the press release you want us to print, share with us, or any publisher, the same objectives you shared with the creative agency when you first briefed them, or the media agency before they put a plan together, or a digital agency or a PR agency, or any of the agencies on your roster. Treat us like that. Say, okay, here's the one thing we're trying to achieve, or maybe it's the 3 or 4 or 5 things we're trying to achieve. But if you share that with us, we can say, all right, we know the audience better than anyone. We'll help you achieve those objectives.
And when we say treat us like the agency, we're not set up like an agency, so we don't have production capabilities of an agency, and a lot of the time we need the help of agencies, but we also need to be treated with shared objectives. Be really clear about what you want to achieve from our audience, what you want them to think, where you want the brand to be positioned, and then we can go away and find ways to do that.
Mm-hmm. So example here is one we did with BMW called The Next Guide.
So BMW gave us a brief and they wanted to be seen as progressive, as leaders in technology, design, style, also wanted to be very relevant to the Broadsheet audience in a daily way, to their everyday life, and also wanted to work within the touch points of food. It was fantastic because we'd been bouncing an idea around for a while about doing a trend forecasting guide. So traditionally at Broadsheet we've covered what's gone on this month, this year, what's about to open, what's happened this week, but we'd never shifted our focus and thought what's going to happen across the rest of the year in Australia and what's going to be influencing our audience, not right now, but maybe in 6 months' time.
Mm. A big key from this, I think Rene just said, is innovation. That was kind of the number one keyword that kept coming across, is innovation, innovation, innovation. We want BMW to be seen as innovators. And this was exactly, as Rene said, a chance for us to look ahead. So people come to Broadsheet all the time, and one of our editorial missions is to talk about what's happening right now. So here's a bunch of stuff to do tonight. Here's a bunch of stuff to do this weekend. Here's something that's opening next week. But we have this incredible relationships, and we have this audience which is hungry for information. So with these relationships, we could say, what are the little bits and pieces? What are the trends that are going to be shaping around what's happening over the next 12 months or 24 months or 3 years? And we started writing that, and we started putting that together. And we found that the audience loved to be social leaders. That's a big social currency, is something that our audience get from us. So being able to say, did you know this thing is happening, or did you know this is something that my friends don't know, and being able to tell them that. And this kind of gave them a head start on that. So we got a really engaged audience that absolutely loved this.
And working with an innovative partner like BMW, it gave a bit of legitimacy to a trend forecast. It said that they are really innovative. They do work in technology. We're able to write about technology when that's not a subject that we normally cover. So together, we really gave the guide a lot more strength than we would have if we'd done it on our own.
Mm. Third point is bring the publisher in early.
Like we said, the publisher holds the key to engaging the audience, and you want your content to be engaging, so the earlier you bring the publisher in, the more likely it is that's going to happen.
Yeah,
that's kind of it.
That's basically it. We've kind of already covered it. We sort of, a lot of these points are reinforcing one another. It's really about something we say in the office quite a bit sometimes is shit flows downhill. So the brand comes up with a brief, the agencies put it together, and then they say, here you go, guys, insert it. Stick that in your publication, please. And we think, come on, guys, this is not what the audience is coming here for. This is not going to engage the audience. This is not what they're here for. You're not going to get good results. If you bring us further up that chain, if you share your objectives with us, if you think about the audience with us, we can put that all together and make sure we're hitting the brand objectives from a really early point.
If you don't do this, you end up with a situation where we're the last people to know about the content that you want to put in front of our audience. And you end up with a situation where you may have a 21-year-old junior media buyer telling our senior editors how to write to our audience. It doesn't work.
You'd be surprised, maybe you wouldn't be surprised, how often we say, here's a TVC, can you publish that? Or here is a little funky web campaign we've done, can you insert that? Or here's a press release, you can rewrite it if you like, just make sure you hit those points. And we think, guys, no one wants to read this isn't why they're here. So the example we've got here is a campaign we did with Bank of Melbourne called The Keys.
We'd had a really successful 12-month partnership leading up to this with Bank of Melbourne. We focused primarily on the audience, the consumer audience, not so much the business audience, but 20% of the broadsheet audience are business owners. So we don't just speak to the people in the restaurants, we speak to the people who own the restaurants, the people who are running the cafes. And so we got a brief to build on the success from the first year with a focus on engaging the businesses within our audience, as well as providing an engagement and retention piece for the broader audience.
Mm-hmm. And the reality is we write about small to medium businesses every single day. Cafes, bars, shops, designers, architects, fashion designers, doesn't matter what it is. It's kind of what we write about. We write about businesses. So a big part of the brief we received was that Bank of Melbourne was talking about helping you take the next step. It's a credit card to help you go on a holiday. It's a home loan to buy your first house. It's a business loan, or it's business advice about starting up your business or taking the next step. So taking the next step was what we took with us, and we thought, okay, well, Bank of Melbourne want to be positioned within local Melbourne community, so coffee. Our audience love coffee, cafes. So it was a really sort of organic place where we started thinking about, okay, well, let's take a cafe operator who wants to take his next step. So there's a guy named Andrew Kelly who runs Auction Rooms, which many of you may know in North Melbourne, and he was looking to start a pretty interesting cafe called Filter, which is on Collins and King now. Which is all about serving filter coffee. So we decided, let's lift up the hood and look inside about what happens as you launch a cafe. People love looking behind the scenes. So we took Andrew we followed Andrew through a video series from coming up with the idea, developing the idea, thinking about the interior design, thinking about the marketing, thinking about the business, thinking about his business plan, thinking about his financing, and gave him mentors, the best we could provide from the city. So Chris Lucas, who owns Chin Chin, was his marketing advisor. Kate Bartholomew, who owns Coda and Tonka, was his interior design and general design mentor. Nathan Tolman from Top Paddock and Kettle Black was his operations mentor. And then we had one of their business bankers, Vanessa, become his business advisor. And we would create a video about each of these pieces of advice. So we ended up taking these rock stars in front of our audience. Chris Lucas, is nothing bigger than Chin Chin, was giving him advice on marketing. And nobody knows marketing a restaurant better than Chris. And then we took Bank of Melbourne and made them a rock star within this campaign.
Yeah, the Bank of Melbourne representative had a legitimate place on the mentor panel to become an influencer within our audience and explain the integral role that a bank plays behind opening a business. And the way that we found Andrew Kelly from Auction Rooms was we opened it up to the audience and said, hey, look at all the cafes on our site and tell us which one that you'd like to see open a second location. Maybe it's your favourite cafe near your home and you want to see it open near work. Maybe it's your favourite cafe at work and you wish they were just around the corner. So the audience got to nominate and vote in order for us to pick Andrew Kelly. And then everyone who was nominated had to supply a business plan to the board for them to look through, and for then the mentors would approve the one that went forward. So in the end, we had a business banking case study that our audience followed for 3 months, engaged, and the traffic was through the roof. If Bank of Melbourne had have come to us with a business banking case study they'd already made, nobody in the audience would look at it. But this way, it was incredibly successful.
So this was about starting with the publisher early, thinking about the audience, all the things we're talking about, you're starting to see come together and how we approach this. This is the big one for me. This is one we talk about all the time. My team is sick of hearing me talk about it. It's finding the intersection. I'd say if there's one thing to take away from our talk today, it is find the intersection. So what we mean by find the intersection is take the audience interest, why have they come to the site, what are they interested in, take the brand objectives and values, and the place where they meet organically is a place where really good branded content happens.
It's not always easy to find, and obviously it's very hard to find without the publisher, so go back to the first few points. It's not quick for us to find because we take the brand objectives. We're really, really, really focused on exactly what the brand wants to achieve. And then we stress test so many different ideas to find the one that goes, that actually delivers on both. And like Nick's saying, that when you find it, you know really easily because it's a really natural fit.
It feels good when you find it. Everything just seems to work. And it would be so much easier. As Rene says, it is not an easy or quick process sometimes. It is really difficult. It'd be so much easier to take a press release and print it, or it'd be so much easier to take a video that a brand has produced. But then the audience switch off straight away, switch off. And worse than switch off, they start yelling. They start getting on Facebook and they say, what is this shit? Get it away from me.
And that makes it really hard for our sales team because a lot of publishers are happy just to say, okay, thank you for the budget. Yes, we will do that. And we can't do that. So I think that we deliver better results, but it does take a little bit longer and we work a bit harder.
So the example we have here today is Holden Trax we worked with. And this is a tough one because you think, what does a car have to do with broadsheet content, which is eating out in restaurants, bars, shops, fashion, it's about a city. What does that got to do with?
So this was one of the small compact SUVs and the brief was about snackable content. Content that's a bit shorter form, but still just as relevant. They wanted it to be really inner city, really urban, and really, really easy to digest, really, really quick. Really, they wanted content that mirrored the brand values of the car.
A big part of what we do, what works really well from content we think about is guides. Guides and collections work super well, particularly suburb guides. People ask us what people search for a lot in broadsheet, and it's often suburbs and streets. What we didn't have was a guide to some of the little neighborhoods within suburbs. And for us, we're looking at the city and we're saying, these are the things that are really driving Melbourne and Sydney right now. It's things like if you think Gertrude Street, it's got 25 bars, cafes, shops. It's really vital, really energetic. And that's what the audience sort of wanted. And it worked really well with this car because the Trax was all about leaving work, for instance, driving down the street and around the corner and through a laneway, parking in, sort of enjoying the city, and then getting off and doing that again. So we found that this sort of content that we already had, but not packaged in any new way. It wasn't about coming up with a brand new, special, funky, out-of-the-box idea. It was about saying, what does the audience really want from us? And what can Trax help them provide?
So we actually got this idea from an all-team brainstorm when our junior sales guy said that we needed city strip guides. And we didn't think that would work so well, but then when he said, no, by strip, I mean the strip of shops. And from there, we kind of evolved it. But the great thing is, we didn't, like Nick's saying, we didn't go away and come up with this crazy new idea for all of this new content that the audience had never seen before. We delivered the content in a way that mirrored the brand values of the car and mirrored the value proposition of the car. And we did it all through illustration. And as people were navigating through the different restaurants in the street, they actually did that via an illustrated Holden Trax. So we found a really, really organic place to insert the car into the content we were creating. It was a natural fit and it worked incredibly well. And
it's an example where we worked with the brand and with their agency AJF to provide these illustrations. So it wasn't saying, okay, here are our brand assets that you guys insert. It was about saying, hey, let's come up with a new special brand asset just for this campaign and just for this execution. And the team were really on board with that, and it performed really well.
And a lot of the time with these campaigns, the creative agency goes away and actually creates a suite of display banners to accompany the content that are in line with the above-the-line campaign, but also speak a little bit more directly to our audience.
Last point, good branded content is not advertorial, it's a partnership. So we think of advertorial as being a one-sided thing. Advertorial is where we say, okay, you guys have an audience, you have a platform, we're just going to rent that platform for you for a little while, and we're going to stick some messaging in there. I think it's probably obvious my opinion on that now. It doesn't work. What works is partnerships. What works is when we say, okay, two different entities are going to provide value to the audience, and that's the publisher and that's the brand. What can we both do together that's going to add extra value to the audience?
And you'll find that if you do work with publishers who run your advertorial, they try and hide it, or they try and distance themselves from it, or they create something to say it's not really ours. But when we come up with an idea, like the last one with Holden, we're really, really proud of it. So we put our stamp on it, and it's Holden times broadsheet. Sometimes that can be challenging for brands because I think through co-branding, they're losing some equity. But what they're gaining within our audience is the broadsheet stamp, the approval. And we are really proud of it, so we really promote it. We're about to show you an example that really illustrates that. It's from a bourbon company. So we got asked to play in the market with Cougar, Jim Beam, Southern Comfort, Jack Daniels. And it was a tough brief. They wanted us to make their bourbon look cool in the eyes of our audience.
Just to go back a point, one of the things about a partnership is that you can, and when you're shouting about a partnership together, is that Bullet Bourbon and Broadsheet are working together, is it reduces the need to start sticking in product mentions in the second paragraph or the third paragraph. You get a buyer or a client saying, you've only mentioned my product 3 times in this article, and you think, oh.
But if we put the name in the title, it's a new thing that we're doing. It's almost like...
That nobody's missing it. Everyone knows what we're talking about. Everyone knows why we're here. It works really well. So the Bullet Bourbon one was a tough one. It was the category, bourbon category in Australia was pretty bogan, and these guys didn't want it to be. So we thought, okay, you guys really want to celebrate the Kentucky and Southern American roots from where bourbon's from, the Bullet's from, sorry. And we thought, okay, that's got nothing to do with Broadsheet. Broadsheet's about Melbourne, it's about Sydney, and it's about doing cool stuff. So what could we do? We did notice, however, more notice, we were watching that the biggest food movement in Melbourne and Sydney at the time, it's about 2012, late 2012, was American barbecue. Every week there was a new barbecue joint or a new burger joint or a new sort of American food joint happening. What a lot of people didn't realize was how deep and rich the barbecue food
barbecue
was.
belt along the southern states.
Southern states, yeah. So a lot of people didn't know that in Texas there was a totally different style of barbecue to Kansas versus Kentucky versus Tennessee. It's all different. Some use sauce, some use beef, some use chicken, some use pork. So this gave us a really interesting opportunity to sort of take a real deep dive into something they actually cared about.
And we're in Melbourne, so this sort of followed off the back of the Mexican craze, when Mexican restaurants were everywhere, everyone's going nuts for Mexican, but the knowledge around the intricacies of the Mexican cuisine were quite low. And there was such a rich story to tell behind the barbecue movement, and bourbon played a really huge part of that. Bourbon's used in a lot of the sauces. One of the other things that was part of this was a premix bourbon drink, which we were even more shocked at, thinking, how are we going to try and work with a premix? But it did really well because we made our own flavour of it. We gave it out at all of the different events that we had.
We had 6 events, Melbourne, Sydney. Another thing that it tied into was we recognised that the bartenders really liked bourbon, or Bullet. So everyone we were talking to about, so I've got this brief, we're working with Bullet Bourbon. The bartenders, the ones we really respect, were going, oh, I cannot wait till this product gets into the country. We're thinking, oh, that's really interesting. And batch brewing cocktails is also a big thing. So what these guys were doing with their premix, the pre-batch, was really about doing batched cocktails. So that worked really well to this thing. So this event became about barbecue, which people loved, about batch cocktails, which people loved as well. And so there's this really authentic partnership taking place.
So we came up with an idea that let us put our brand next to a bourbon brand. And we're really proud of that, and it did very well. If we had to leave you with something today, if I could sort of sum it up, from my end, it would be to think about inserting content and start thinking about creating content, and stress test all your content ideas and ask yourself, if you weren't working on this brand and your brand wasn't involved with this content, would anyone care about it? Because for it to be successful, the answer has to be yes.
What if, because bottled water is stupid, we launched a brand of bottled water? Take on the multinationals, the big brands out there, and give consumers a choice. And in that moment, get them to buy a product that exists 100% to get water to people who need it.
All of our well-established, mature products, we need to simplify them down. We need to simplify the proposition to our customer. We need to simplify how we sell it. We need to simplify how we manage them internally.